Hello and welcome to the 2024 Ethical Leadership Forum here in Vail, Colorado. My name is Travis Coggin. I'm the mayor of this beautiful town, and I'm excited to be here representing the town of Vail, which is a sponsor of this year's event. So I hope that you're here to not only enjoy our beautiful town and everything that it offers, but here to challenge each other and to discuss the very pressing issues of ethics and leadership that is so desperately needed in our community these days, not only locally, but nationally and internationally. These are topics that we can always strive to improve upon, whether it's on the small scale locally or the global scale. The conversations that you'll have today, the ideas that you will be discussing can truly have impacts for generations to come. So have a wonderful time here in Vail, and we hope that you leave with your body and your mind refreshed and challenged.
All right, Bob, come on up here. Hi, everyone. My name is James Kenley. I serve as the executive director of the Vail Symposium, and we are so thrilled and proud to partner with students shoulder to shoulder on the Ethical Leadership Forum. Welcome to the keynote, One Humanity, One Planet. I'm going to turn things over to Bob in just a moment to set the stage for what we're about to experience. And it's more than what we're about to hear. This is going to be an experience. So thank you for spending your Friday here with us. The Vail Symposium, we're the geeks of the Vail Valley. We're the educational nonprofit here, and we've been providing thought-provoking programs to the community since 1971. This partnership is relatively new, just the last couple of years. We found a kindred spirit, Bob and I, as individuals and our organizations in this mission. So we're thrilled that you're here to explore these concepts, to deepen your understanding, and as Bob will share in just a minute, to go back into your communities, into your networks, and begin the ripple. We hope that this sets something in motion, and we look forward to revisiting this with you a year from now at the next Ethical Leadership Forum. So with that, Bob, would you set the stage for us?
Thanks, James. What I love about our partnership, many things, but it's the formalities. One of those being, you can't see this, but there is a clock here, which people who know me know that I usually don't work by a clock. So thank you for that. I don't know how I'm connected to that clock, so I'm walking away from it. So anyway, welcome. I'll start I want to thank some folks, and in thanking people is kind of the message of our approach, of a shoulder to shoulders organizational model, and also of what I think is an approach to moving towards this ideal of ethical leadership, which I'll talk about in a moment. You can see here, and you've seen it in posters around, I think maybe even behind me, organizations that have come together to make this possible. This being, it's a 2-day forum. The first day is with NGOs, nonprofits, and educators. And this is the time where we bring in the public, and that public is our businesses, students, and educators are here joining us as well. So if you would, when you have a chance, just click a few times on some of our sponsors. I want to point out the town of Vail. So that Travis, the mayor, makes me grin. He's a former student of mine, and he's actually pretty articulate, I think, maybe more so than when he was a student of mine, so he escaped. So anyway, the way we look at how we organize around this idea, or to move this idea of ethical leadership forward, is to bring stakeholders to the table. And the stakeholders that we see are actually represented here. If when we started shoulder to shoulder, this was the ideal, actually, what I'm looking at. And part of it, again, are the people who made it possible for us to be here. It is so much money to put on a forum like this. It is not possible without people who are generous, and I know all of these folks. And the generosity, I want to kind of explain what I think that is. It's a generosity toward an ideal. They have a vision of a world that they want to see, and they see this as a strategy of getting to that world. So quickly, it's the Borgen Family Foundation. I don't even know if shoulder to shoulder would be where it is right now. Never mind this event if it wasn't for that generous family and their foundation. So thank you so much to the Borgens. And there's two brands under one company, or sometimes I mix up the name, but it's Blue Sky Imagine Productions and Ship Glide. And they are it's really interesting, international. Ship Glide in particular is cutting edge, not only using technology that exists, but creating technology to have working on having a significant impact on environmental global issues, really reducing the footprint of the shipping process. I won't get into technology because I don't know it that well, but it's really interesting just to click on there and learn about that. The two hotel partners, Antlers, are hosting our NGOs and our educators mostly, and we did most of our programming there yesterday, and also the Sebastian. Did I get everybody? I did, right? Yes, and we are a 1% for the Planet organization, and I don't know if people know what that is, but just briefly, they are an organization of companies, both nonprofit and for-profit, and what they do is they help create alliances between the two, and all of that is in service of organizations that are trying to make a difference environmentally. All of that leads to maybe two things. One is, and sometimes people hear me say this, but just quickly, maybe we should start before even ethical leadership, just quickly, ethics and what ethics is all about. I just see it, and I try to make things as simple as possible. I do have some former ethics students here, and they might not agree with that. But just simply when we're thinking about ethics, I think one way that we can all absorb is just think of it as the, if you will, the active arm of moral philosophy. So wherever we are morally, the deep beliefs that we have, what we think about when we think about ethics is acting on that belief. And it's a good place to start when we're thinking about ethical leadership, because when we're thinking about how ethics and leadership come together, I'll give you just kind of this idea, is the notion that when, think about it maybe more as an aim, as where we're going, as opposed to how to get there. But getting there is surely important. But just for now, just think of it as an aim, and that aim being success. Everybody here wants to be successful. There are high school students here, they would like to be successful as a high school student. There are businesses here want to be successful. There are schools here, they want to have successful schools. So success is defined in unique ways. The reason why we take the idea, and there's a qualifier I'd like to add, and put ethics and leadership together, is because it's the combination of success and contributing to a healthy society. Somebody just brought up in the meeting, and it's so true, why do we even have to qualify leadership that way? And ideally, we shouldn't have to. But we do it as an emphasis. that we can all, everybody here, all these sectors that we bring together to the table, all the stakeholders, everybody here can be successful, and that success in some way can be connected to a healthier society. So that's one way to start. When we're in a forum like this, we're usually at the stage of what I call moral imagination. We are imagining the way the world ought to be. But there's a little bit of a problem, which is in ethics, we used to call it the ought versus the is, right? Do my ethics students remember that? Okay, good. And so the world is a certain way, and the world ought to be a certain way, and ethical leadership works in that space. We work to close that gap. So I'm saying that because I think it's important for us to pump up our moral imaginations. But at the same time, there's this other thing called moral courage. And that's difficult. And it is the reason why we think that the process of bringing all of you together and to bring cross sectors together is critical, because that's where you can find the strength, that's where you can find the moral courage to move from where the world is to where the world ought to be. And it is risky. Brings me to a quick story. It's just, there's a lot of soccer players here too, so it's a quick soccer story. But it is a coach, famous coach. He was knighted, and his name's Sir Alex Ferguson. And they asked him, what do all the best coaches have in common? And he said, they've all been canned. They've all been fired. And that's, it's just a statement about what courage really is. If it's really moral courage, it's really risky. And the risks can come in so many ways. But the rewards, in my mind, are always greater. So thank you all for being here. We have two keynotes who are, we talk about this in our organization as having moral example. And we're going to bring two keynotes up who are moral example for me in my leadership of students shoulder to shoulder. And I will tell you, they're moral leaders at an international level. And I don't want to take more time than that. They're going to come up, but the first person that's coming up is Tim Jones, who I met a few months ago. Tim, where are you? There you are, come on up. And I'm going to let Tim talk about his organization. Come on up. And why we brought him in. I heard about Tim, read about it, and then actually went to, is the event called Longer Tables? Yeah. Is that the event I went to? Okay, all right. Sure. And it resonated with something we were doing in Shoulder to Shoulder. We called them Jeffersonian dinners. And it was this idea, again, of coming together and sharing ideas. Tim has taken this to a whole nother level. So he is kind enough to come up here, and he's going to organize us using that model. So Tim, I'm going to let you take over. Okay, there you go. Yep.
Thank you, Bob. Thank you for your partnership, and I'm just kind of blown away by the people in this room, so thank you for your leadership. I'm going to make a bold statement right now. Probably the most important thing you're going to hear all day. I think we have solved all these issues in our society. The toxic leadership. I don't know if you've heard about the epidemic of isolation and loneliness. I think we've solved this. Are you ready for this? Do you have your pen ready? Okay, here it is. Get ready. Tacos. It's tacos. Tacos. Can I get an amen? Amen. Oh my gosh. Now I'm thinking about tacos. I'm half joking about tacos, and you'll see what I mean. About 10 years ago, I lived in LA, 13 years. I moved back to Denver, and I met a new friend, Carrie. And Carrie invited me to something she called a table. And she said, hey, do you want to have dinner with a bunch of people from all walks of life? And I'm a high extrovert, and I'm like, yeah, heck yeah. She's like, great, bring a side dish and a bottle of wine and show up. And so I did that. I showed up, and I was shocked what I found. I found an 80-foot table, and it had white linens and wine glasses and real place settings. And she had greens down the table and fruits and vegetables and candles. It was absolutely beautiful. And I'm like, this is interesting. So then 80 people started showing up from racial diversity, socioeconomic diversity, people that didn't look like me, and they were carrying their food and their bottles of wine. And it came time for dinner, and she greeted us, Carrie, and she said, there's 2 rules tonight. First rule is there's no talk about work. No job titles. It's not welcome tonight at the table. Yep, exactly. Oh my gosh. We love that rule because people have panic when they hear that. Number 2, we want to experience the real you tonight. So this isn't a table of performance or impressing anyone. We just want to invite you to be where you're at the table. So everyone kind of panics for half a second, and then everyone takes their seats. And because we're not talking about work, she had questions down the table that really prompted storytelling from our lives. And I will never forget that table 10 years ago. The risks, the vulnerability, the authenticity that was shared at that table. And when you start sharing like that, you start to learn that we have so much more in common than the differences that divide us. So I walked away from that night and I said, I don't know what this is, but I gotta be a part of this. So we started setting tables 3 or 4 in different parts of Denver. I'm a big idea guy. I went and got a big idea. I said, hey, Denver's the mile-high city. I think we need to set the mile-long table. Anyone with me? No. But we got this close to setting a mile-long table. And we had a few setbacks, and then the pandemic happened. No tables for 2 years, right? We came back from the pandemic. We had 80 people from all walks of life sitting at one table. Half the people were masked, half the people were unmasked. You're welcome as you are. For 2 hours, no one left their seat. We were starved for connection. We were starved to be seen by someone, to be 18, 22 inches away from someone. We were starved to tell some of our stories of what we had just experienced in the pandemic. And that night, I heard a little voice say, it is time to double down on this. This is like a public service. This is so very important. So we have started setting tables everywhere. It is unbelievable. We have set tables in 4 states in the last 2 months. We are going into companies. Companies, as you know, are siloed. We've got this hybrid work thing. We're trying to figure that out. We have burned out people, and we're not communicating each other. And companies say, hey, could you bring this in? And can we eat together? And we said, yes. This was 3 nights ago. We were down in Littleton, which is a suburb of Denver, and we have a community of a cross-section of faith leaders, small business leaders, civic leaders who said, hey, if we start doing relationship together, we're going to make a greater impact. And the meal sounds like a good way to do this. And so that was in a high school. This is absolutely wild. We have been invited by the United Nations to set a table this year. I'm like, do you have the right guy? I don't know about that. And the level, yeah, man, can you imagine some of these leaders, like not talking about the issues, not talking about their opinions or their perspectives or their tribes, but just simply sitting and eating and sharing some of their stories. We think that could absolutely transform. And what happens out of a table? You know, I often say we gotta leave our pragmatism at the door. Meals and tables are like slow cooked food, just like relationships. Have you tried to microwave trust? Have you tried to fast forward a relationship? It doesn't work that way. The table helps us slow down and see one another. And the connections that are made, just exchanging a phone number, having a conversation. It happens all the time. My favorite story, you got to be careful what happens at a table. We had a couple meet, fall in love, and have a baby, and they met at a table. So I always warn people, be careful who you meet at a table, because, well, you get the idea. So just a few thoughts of what is happening at the table. It is this beautiful place. The table is home for everyone. What place in society, in our culture, do we have that? So my friends are from Sri Lanka. The table is home just as much for them as it is for me. It's beautiful. So it's a place that we have. And then there's this beautiful thing, as we eat, we are biologically sustaining our lives. But as we share that meal and we're across the table from other people, and we're not talking about work, but we're sharing our stories, just as the food puts life back in us and sustains our life, that conversation, that communion, that connection with each other literally puts the humanity back in the people at the table. There's something about our culture that is bent on us versus them. Our labels, our categories, it's really a misguided safety issue, motivation, if you know what I mean, but the table gets rid of all of that and puts the life back in people. And so here's the third part of the table, which is so interesting. The table actually is not impressed with what you do for work. It is not impressed with how much money is in your bank account. It's not impressed with your skin color or where you grew up. It doesn't care. Here's a fact. If you don't eat, you die. And that's for every single one of us. Every single human on this planet has to eat or they die. So the table has this equalizing effect. It's like this great equalizer. And so when we come to the table like we did here, and we're not talking about work, politics doesn't even come up, because we're having people tell their stories. And all that's left is a bunch of humans sitting at the table. And so as we've gone along with this journey, we've set beautiful tables across the city and other places, on university campuses. We have discovered that this is a leadership issue. And what I've come to find out or discover is that healthy and whole leaders who have done the work, who have the courage to show up in their wholeness and their truth and just being honest, those types of leaders set tables. Whole, healthy leaders set tables for their people. And I'm talking about, yes, literal tables, but I'm talking more about metaphorical tables. When you bring, as a leader, a cross-section of people together, whether it's in your city, like what's happening here, or it's in your company, or if it's in your neighborhood, when you bring those people together, it is remarkable what happens. We're so busy in our lives self-protecting or self-promoting. And when all that goes away, when we're invited to take the mask off, that's when we connect. And that's what leaders do. Leaders set places where people can show up in their fullness and wholeness, can put a place card on the table with their name on it and say, hey, we want all of you. We want your story, we want the good, we want the bad, we want the ugly, we want the brilliance, we want all of that. And what happens when that happens, and Harvard has studied this in depth, that's when connection, that's when collaboration is unlocked, that's when creativity is unlocked, and that is when innovation happens. When people feel safe and invited to show up at the table. So we are imagining a community of leaders who will absolutely change the world at the table, one meal at a time. So, you are going to get the opportunity to do this today. Are you excited? It's going to be great. So I don't know, have we announced that there's numbers on the back of, okay, so we know you have a number. If you're not at your table after the keynotes, we want you to go to that table because we are mixing you up. You don't get to sit with the usual characters or the usual cats that you sit with. So that's part of the beauty of sitting with other folks. Guess what? So over lunch, there's 2 rules today. You might have heard about these. There is no job talk today. So no job titles over lunch. I know that's weird for a conference like this, but it's not welcome, at least over lunch. And number 2, we want to experience the real you today. So I don't know where you're at in your life. I imagine there are people in this room that are in a really hard season. And if that's you, if you're in that place, you're welcome to be at that place. These tables are not a place of performance, impressing anyone, showing people how much you know, dominate. It is a place of humility and listening and presence and witness. So 2 things over lunch. We'll have questions up on the screen during lunch, but we want everyone at your table to take 2 or 3 minutes and share a story from a work experience or a partnership experience where you were invited to be your whole self, that you were welcome as it was the healthiest expression of a team that you have experienced. So take 2 or 3 minutes per person and share that at the table. And then as a table, number 2, we want you to form a question for our keynote speakers. So work together and craft a question after you hear what they have to say. So I am so very excited. Thank you, Bob, for taking a risk to do this. We think this is going to be absolutely powerful, and we hope it's a gift to you, and that this is a simple model that you can take with you into any organization. It goes anywhere. The table goes anywhere. So it is my honor to introduce our keynote speakers for this morning. Dr. Karambu Ringera, who is the founder of International Peace Initiatives, and Richard Lackey, who is the founder and chairman of the World Food Bank. I haven't met them personally, but I imagine we are going to be soon in the company of some table setters. So would you welcome Richard Lackey? Nope, Dr. Karambu.
Thank you. Thank you. Oh my God.
Right, Aaron. Yep, you got it.
Oh, I got it. Oh, great. This is more for me than for you. So allow me to invite you to gently close your eyes or hold a soft gaze in front of you and take 2 deep breaths on your own. Gently close your eyes or hold a soft gaze onto the table on the ground. Take a moment to reflect on your journey here this morning and what you've heard so far. And just hold it and let it be. And bring yourself, your full self, to what is coming next. So take 2 deep breaths on your own to anchor that, to let go, and be here now. Thank you so much. Gently open your eyes and welcome. My name is Karambu Ringera. I come from Kenya. Thank you, Student Shoulder to Shoulder team, for having me here this morning and yesterday. I am so happy to be here. Let me see who is here, who came from Africa in the last week. Put up your hand. So you get why I'm happy? Africa is right here, right now. Thank you for having Africa here. I am so happy also because I have some friends who've been to Kenya, who are right here. Amelia, who's been an alumni of Student Shoulder to Shoulder. Jim, Christine, who've led teams to Kenya. Valentina also, and everybody else that I'm forgetting, you're included. Michelle, my friend, thank you for being here. And one of my kids from the home that I'm going to be talking about, Betty, is here. Just stand and wave because you're here. Thank you so much for the image of the table, because Kithoka Amani Children's Home and International Peace Initiatives are a table that we have created in Kenya, in Africa, for vulnerable women and children. I'm calling my talk The Power of Unlearning, Inspiring Disruption in Everyday Being. And I know each one of us here today, in one way or another, have had to unlearn something so that you can step into disrupting the systems within which we have been socialized. I work for International Peace Initiatives, and Kithoka Amani Children's Home is a core program of International Peace Initiatives. So I'm just going to focus on the home, because the home raises children who we call orphans, or children who've been made vulnerable by some circumstance in their life. Even by calling them vulnerable is a misnomer. And that is what I try to disrupt. That was us in 2020, the COVID year. And the government said that all children's homes, all institutions should be closed and people should go home. I had a government official keep telling me that we needed to close the children's home, and I kept telling him, some of my kids don't have a place to go. He didn't get it. He said, the government says. And for one moment, I was like, who's the government? So I talk about seeing from soul. The soul of the issues that we work with, but also from the soul of the person with whom we are doing the life dance. Bob talks about moral courage. There's the moral courage to do the work that we do, but think of the moral courage that a kid that we have named orphan needs to cultivate for themselves to step into their fullness, to remember who they are, because the systems that we've set up have drowned their voice, because we call them wastelands, barren spaces where life-giving features and forces have been disconnected, displaced, distorted, or destroyed. By who? So I grew up in a context that taught me that I am an expert. I have a degree, a bachelor's degree, 2 master's degrees, and a PhD. I spent about 24 years of my life going to school. And right now, my business is to disrupt education, in good ways, though. But they taught me that I'm an expert. And when you are an expert, you think for people. You prescribe solutions for them. And in that way, we speak for people. I could speak for the kids that I work with, or for the women that we work with. And then, in speaking for them, we make them victims of their circumstances. They become voiceless, and we silence them, so that they're helpless and hopeless. That gives us work to do. However, there is no one who is helpless or hopeless except for the systems we've created to box people so that we can help them. So the systems box then puts us in fear. You know, like you can imagine when you're working with a kid who doesn't have parents, they don't even see a future. They don't even think about a future. What where will I be without my parents? It's very easy to control a person who is driven by fear. And then it gives us the savior syndrome with which we hover down to help them. Sheroism and heroism, ego, solo mentality, I did it, and my way is the right way. Get off my way. Competition. So I had to stop and think about what kind of person I needed to be in accompanying. I don't help anyone. I walk with, shoulder to shoulder, with the women and the children. So the old model, the one that I semi-described, is on the left, and a regenerative model is what my work has taught me about. I won't go through every one of those, but take it and go and think about it. When we move out of fear and step into love and possibility and collaboration, it brings everybody together. It is emergent. It doesn't control anyone. It gives openness and space for everybody to step into their power. For the tragedy of a people is when they don't know who they are and their power, because we stole their agency by victimizing them and naming them according to their circumstances. That's a piece of rocky wasteland on the left. That's a piece of land I was given by the community to build the children's home. And I felt like they were saying, take this piece of wasteland for your wasteland, women living with HIV and AIDS, and your children, and see how it looks like today. This is a piece of monocropped piece of wasteland, which is the Eco Center, that is the sustainability project for the children's home. That's how it looks today. And the children, they came from challenging circumstances, raised by grandmothers or widows, or even, like the one who is at the bottom, the mother died after giving birth to him. And whatever the wastelands, and even as I talk about mine, think about yours. What are the wastelands here? Why are they wastelands anyway? According to who? So my business has been to reclaim these spaces. Before I reclaim any space, I have to have done that work for myself. So that's a summary of what each one of those reclaim elements stands for. And I don't have the time to go through all of them. But the R stands for taking responsibility. And to take responsibility is to understand, to be aware, to embody, and to own my circumstances, recognizing I'm not my circumstances. The E stands for empoweredness. Empowerment is what you do for someone. Empoweredness is what I choose to do with that gift that someone has given me. Courage, moral courage, to not only look at the moral courage that I need to change a situation, but also to be aware of the moral courage that this kid needs to cultivate to see themselves as whole, complete, and enough. So a systems approach then has been for me, when I work with a child, I not only look at the child, but the context within which they are experiencing their circumstances. Reclaiming that space actually also holds miracle. We reclaim and create miracles in the lives of the kids that we work with. So reclaim, if you look around, you will see it also makes the word miracle. Okay? And this is, I'm not going to belabor this, but utu for me is the humaneness with which I do my humanity. Utu is a Swahili word for humaneness. How do I be human? The beingness, the intention that feeds my being human is what guides that conversation of finding who I am. So imagine I'm working with an orphan. I'm working with a kid who thinks there is no future. And I'm saying, who are you? Because what the first thing that the system does is it steals away who we are. But a child, a person has to know, to name themselves for who they are. And it's not from the naming from the society. It is when you peel all those layers, what is left as who you are. And once you understand who you are, then it is what stops you. I have to understand the systems and how they've shaped me and the mask that I wear every day when I get out of the door so that I fit in the system. I'm saying understand the systems that have shaped me, own that shaping, but then choose to create my own new story about who I am. And then create allies who will do the life dance with me. And then reflect on, what do I need to unlearn? What do I need to relearn so that I can grow, glow, evolve, and flourish? That's the Utu new story conversation that I have with the women and the children as a way of coming back home to our own agency, naming ourselves for who we are. And so when you do this regenerative redefining of who you are, you realize that you have to redefine terms. You've been called an orphan. To call a kid an orphan, in Kimeru, we don't have, my local language, you don't have a name for a child without a parent, because a child could never be parentless when there were uncles and aunties in the community. So redefine those terms. When you call a kid an orphan, they carry the burden of that naming. And it's not their fault that their parents died. But one of my kids once told me, I may be an orphan, but I'm not the one who is dead. For a kid to figure that out, I was like, amen. That process of coming back home to naming themselves has worked. If a kid can tell me, I may be an orphan, but I'm alive, and I'm going to do something with my life. So the power of bringing voice into my circumstances, I recognize I'm never alone. I am known. And I understand the interconnectedness that we embrace being in this community. It's about interbeing. We are whole and we're enough as we are, and we are love and light. And that's what we are called to share and to shed on our lives so that we can hold that space for someone else. And so for my kids, I don't look at them as powerless. I don't look at them as broken. I see them in their wholeness. So I like those lines. I'll not rescue you, for you're not powerless. I'll not fix you, for you're not broken. I will not heal you, for I see you in your wholeness. I will walk with you through the darkness as you remember your light. That's our business. The societal conditioning has buried people's lights, and we don't recognize that. So we misname people from their circumstances and forget our business is to accompany someone so that they can remember, because they have it. It's within them. It's within each one of us. The journey is about reclaiming and remembering. Our taproot. What's my source? What do I draw from? The taproot of a plant does all those things for the plant. That is what I'm called to do for myself when I step into my taproot, so that someone else can see theirs too. So I call this embodied Utu, lived Utu, authentic beingness, because The question is, this societal box, you've had people say, work, what is it that they say? Work outside the box, get out of the box. But my question is, do we just work out of the box or step out of it, or should we throw the box away? So reclaim is about remembering. When you remember, you remember, you reconfigure, and you rename. That's our privilege. It's not a privilege that is based in negativity. It's a privilege to step into my power and to know I have all it takes to transform my circumstances and be that. Okay? I already said something about that. So whether my kids come from those circumstances that I just showed you earlier on, look at that child. You can't even imagine where they came from. Look at their stance. They're all holding. I didn't tell them to hold their hips like this, but that's a sign of confidence. They smile. They have a sense of who they are. People come to our place and they say, "Oh, your children seem happy." I say they don't seem, they are, because truly they are. I don't want you to see my kids from your own circumstances or your own judgment. See them from their moral imagination place. That's Betty. Betty is here. In January this year, she was the leader who took Yvonne to Geneva to attend a UN youth conference. And she had just finished high school. I didn't look at her as this young woman who cannot. I gave her an opportunity to step into a higher self. They were nervous, they were afraid, but they did it. They got lost too, a little bit. But it's in getting lost that you get to know one or two things. Evans was a street boy, literally living on the streets with his brother. He now lives in Sweden and works with Volvo. How did he get there? He's even written an article titled, "From the Streets to Sweden." We invite our kids or we bring the world to our kids. That's student shoulder-to-shoulder groups in Kenya. That's Amelia there making 1 trillion chapatis. And she used to eat, how many? I won't. Our kids may come from the streets, but once they find their voice and they remember who they are, they become leaders wherever they are. All those kids who are co-facilitators for our Now leadership program are kids who are our alumni. The Children's Home, IPI, is now run by IPI alumni, kids who've benefited from the work that we've done. I said that already. Our work is to disrupt these systems and these spaces so that our kids can remember who they are and say, I may be an orphan, but I'm the one who is living. For when I step and embody my tap-rootedness, I allow another to see and embrace their own. That's a mantra that we have at the Children's Home. My favorite line there is, I am whole, pure, complete, and enough. Thank you.
I'm on the disrupting schools, us. Thanks, Kronberg. And Richard. is here. No? Yes? Oh, there it is. Richard, come on up. Yeah, we want you to talk, not me. Yeah, okay, all right, good. Oh, and you're?
Thank you. I've got,
Okay.
am I on? Am I on? Am I on?
James.
How about now?
Good.
James, what about?
Now? Can you hear me? You can? Okay. Well, how much time do I have? You tell me what you want.
Good 30. Go for it.
Really? God. Okay. So I'm going to give you just enough background so you can appreciate this. I grew up in Georgia, so I come from a disadvantaged redneck background. But the good thing is I was kicked out of Georgia because I talked too fast and they couldn't understand. So we're going to cover about an hour's worth of information in about 24 minutes, okay? We'll get it done quickly. It means you have to listen fast, though, but you can do it because you ski fast. That's even more complicated. I know because I tried and failed a few times. We're going to talk today about one humanity and one planet. And I love what you just shared, Dr. Ringera, because my experience in Africa, after years of effort and millions of dollars wasted trying to bring in solutions that we thought would work, when you slow down to listen to people, you find out that sometimes your ideas are not their ideas. You find out the solutions here are not the solutions for there. You find out that what people are thinking and what they dream of and what they want to happen in their lives is different than what you think. And I'm going to share a quick story, and we'll come back to it kind of at the end. I was with a group that we bought a farm, about a 5,400 acre farm in western Uganda, worked with a number of ladies, ironically, and I'm not trying not to be sexist, but because they perform better. We didn't hire them because they were women. We weren't doing, it wasn't a DEI structure. It was, we were hiring people that proved that they could do the same work that we taught on their farms, and it just so happened that 82% of them were women. So they got hired. They started going from $300 a year in income to $3,000 to $8,000 to $12,000. We said, hey, we'd like to give you 2,000 acres and finance it for you and have you farm it, and we'll support it if you can't make a payment. It's no problem, however long it takes you, and we'd like to push this land to you. And they said, well, Mr. Lackey, do you need us to take that 2,000 acres? Or do you want us to take the 2,000 acres? I said, well, we think it's an opportunity. You know, you guys could go from 12,000 a year in income to 30,000 a year in income. You're in the top 1% of earners. You could be in the 1/10 of 1% of all earners. You already make just about what the president makes. You could make a lot more. And they said, well, let's talk. We'll come back. And so a buddy of mine who happened to have been the former president of Vision Fund, an offshoot of World Vision, we kind of looked at each other and said, if somebody came to me and offered me 2,000 acres, I'd be going, yes, sir, where do we sign? They went out and they came back and they said, we appreciate so much what we've learned. And we are growing more and better. All of our kids are in school. We have a savings plan that we've worked out as our group. We all have a metal roof on our house and concrete floors. But we love each other. And we get to spend time together every day. We're living the life we never dreamed of. We don't need anything more. And it hit Scott and I. Our dreams are not their dreams. In America, sometimes we think we need a bigger home, we need a bigger car, we need more homes, we need more properties, we need more assets. But we're starting to find out today, as Bob has shared, maybe what we need is more community. Maybe we need more time together doing well. Maybe it's by doing good. Sometimes it's just by being together. So we want to make sure that when we move forward, my caution as we talk about how some of the things that we've done to leverage and build ecosystems, I am super excited about, but we need to do it with an air of caution. Africa has been told by the West, and now by their own leadership for many, many years, that there are poor people living in a poor country on a poor continent with little hope for a future. But we're here to save you. It's okay, we're going to make it better. We did some bad things, and now we're going to try to make it better. Well, you know what? They don't need that. They're just as bright, just as intelligent, just as capable, because they've been suffering. My mother was a teacher for many years, had a sign over her desk that said, we've been doing so much for so long with so little. We can now do almost anything with nothing at all. You want to get somebody innovative? Go to Meru, right? You want to do something innovative? Go to Ethiopia. Those folks have figured things out, and they're incredibly innovative. They just need a door open. They don't need to be given sorrow or pity. They need to be given a door that they can walk through, and they will take care of the rest, and they'll blow your mind, right? So what we want to do is build ecosystems. And I served on the board of a government organization. I'm not going to say the name because they would be upset with me. But we spend about $60 billion a year throwing stuff on the wall, hoping some of it sticks. Some of it does stick, but most of it fails because we do projects and programs. So if there's nothing else, if you fall asleep for the rest of this, if there's nothing else, please, my message is work together in community to build ecosystems. Build systems. We can solve one piece, but if you don't solve for the rest of the ecosystem, the rest of it will likely fail, especially in more fragile areas like the United States. We're going to talk about agriculture, and the reason we're going to talk about agriculture is because we realize that if you keep taking a step backward and a step backward, and you say, how can we solve for hunger? Well, if you're in Africa, you can solve for hunger by helping farmers to grow more food. If you want to solve for poverty, 72% of the population in sub-Saharan Africa is involved in agriculture. Maybe you could, I don't know, help them to grow more food. If we wanted to build a better planet, we could start by taking everything that's dead, like, I don't know, the dirt, and we could change the way that we manage dirt and turn it back into soil because it's the single largest biome on the planet. Everybody know what the largest organ in your body is? The skin, right? We talk about all the other things we do, but the skin, I was a paramedic many, many years ago, and you know what's a real disaster? And it's not a fraternity or sorority, but it's a fraternity that thinks it's funny to paint people with that paint that they use to make road stripes, because you can't breathe through it when you put it on your body, and you'll actually suffocate and die if you get your body painted in that. So if your children are going to college, make sure you tell them, if somebody wants to paint you with road paint, say no, because that's not good. In Spanish, we'd say, no bueno, you know. That's the problem that we have now, is we have folks coming in with a solution or something they think is innovative, and they don't think about the rest of the ecosystem. But we found that if you keep digging deeper, pun intended, you come to soil. Everything begins with soil. The world's in crisis. What's not going wrong? We've been talking about this through the whole 2 days here, I think, is about hunger, poverty, social equity, planet issues, that sort of thing. And I don't want to focus on that. I actually want to change the tide a little bit. What we've had is sometimes it's people, sometimes it's purposeful, sometimes it's not. But we have a focus on creating disunity in this world. We point out groups that are not having an opportunity here, and we create an opportunity that's not appropriate for that group. We say that the climate is changing with so-and-so, but we don't change the practices in a proper way. We find something else that may be even worse. There was an organization that was created about 40 or 50 years ago that was trying to solve the problem of feeding a world that was starving. And they created technologies to breed plants better. And it worked. And tens of millions of people were fed. And probably tens of millions of lives were saved because we started using genetically modified organisms. Now we're finding out that genetically modified organisms create side effects. We're finding out that now if I create a certain seed that's susceptible to this but not susceptible to that, that I have to treat a chemical that's better to treat the pests that are, now I have to create a seed that isn't susceptible to the chemical so that I can treat the pest, and it just becomes one after the other. How many of you are in the medical field? Okay, so you know about the problems that we have with resistance, right? We used to have, back in the day, we had something called methicillin-resistant Staph aureus, MRSA. And it used to be, oh no, that's only in LA and New York and places where we have really rough disease states, people from all over the world coming in that are HIV or cancer or whatever, but immunocompromised folks. It'll never really get to anywhere else. MRSA is in every nursing home in the United States now. Now we have something called VRSA, vancomycin-resistant Staph aureus. You know what the cure for VRSA is? Anybody know what therapy is for VRSA? It's about 8 foot long. It's made of wood. You have nails in the top. That's the therapy for that. We've created so many things where this will kill this, but it creates a resistance to something else, and we treat with that, and we create a resistance to something else. What we found is that the closer you get to nature, the better things are. Sometimes you have to take a step backwards to go forward. Of the world's poorest, 800 million people rely on agriculture. The irony of this is the 800 million people that rely on agriculture that are living in poverty are also the people that are going to feed the world when we have an extra billion people on the planet. The people that we're worried about are the saviors of the world. They need to be empowered to do what they need to do. We're not going to fix it. We are not going to fix it. We are going to fix it. There's a saying, some people say it's Swahili, some say it's Zulu, but it's an African phrase that says, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. We have a long way to go, folks. We have to go together. We have to change the narrative. And I kind of mentioned that, so for sake of speed, I'm going to cut through that. For me, the solution begins with soil, and I'm sure if you guys heard that you were coming to listen to a talk about the importance of dirt, you might not be here. But I want to share something with you. How many people know that the biome of the soil has more organisms in it than everything above the soil? There's over 1 billion organisms in a handful of dirt. There's over 50,000 different kinds, but there's over 1 billion living organisms in a handful of dirt. When we plant different plants, we do it to create structure. We talk about carbon. People talk about carbon in one facet of carbon. The problem isn't carbon per se. The problem is the entirety of the ecosystem. We've done little things that have taken the ecosystem out of balance. The ecosystem of the land and the planet is very much like the enteric system of the human body. There's a balance of fungus and bacteria and virus and other living organisms. If you're lucky and you travel a lot, maybe a parasite or two. But all of that, have you ever noticed that if you go to a foreign country, there's people eating different diets that may be super spicy, and you eat it and it melts your lips, but for them it's not a big deal. Part of that may be genetic, but part of that is adaptive. They've learned to build and adopt into that market. We have to allow folks to be dynamically adjusting what they're doing. But mostly, we need to understand that plants act as an energy catalyst. So I'm going to give a little bit of an analogy. Actually, I'm going to skip to this story. So Mr. Roundtree, and that really was his name. I worked in a greenhouse for a summer in Georgia, you can guess, picking peaches, and then worked in a greenhouse during the summer. And Mr. Roundtree came in one morning, and I was in there cleaning stuff up, and it was a little bit chilly. He had the fans going. And I said, well, Mr. Roundtree, if you, as a polite Southern boy would say, if you want to turn off the fans, it's okay with me, because it's kind of cold. But he said, well, Richard, the fans aren't to keep the plants cold. The temperature of the soil is more important than the temperature of the air. That's really, you can have 112 degree heat outside, and plants will grow just fine if the soil is cool. But plants are like people. They need a little wind. If they grow up with no stress, they grow up tall and thin, and then any stress, they fall over. You want to know why a kid in Meru that grows up on the street, fighting for everything that he has, can do anything that he wants? Because he's been fighting for it the whole time. You want to know why he can pull a 140-pound dog and jerk him out of a ditch when he wants something that's in the ditch? It's because he's been doing stuff like that his whole life. If he had been given a silver spoon and he didn't have any stress in his life, he would be weak. He may look good, and he may be tall and look like he has some power, but he has no real power. Power comes from going through stress, taking on risk. Plants need stress. What happens when they get stressed? They drive roots deeper into the soil because they're looking for more nutrition, they're looking for more water, and they're looking for a stronger base. Can you see the analogy with humans that way? The difference is not only is the soil a biome for plants and fungus and bacteria that's a real miracle. Fungus actually acts like the neurological system of the human body. It actually transfers messaging to rocks and says, convert this rock so that I can get the calcium and the potassium, the zinc and what have you that I need to feed this plant. It's really, really amazing. And people are kind of the same thing, but where do they go? We used to go to community. Now we go to the internet. We have a lot of content, but we don't have a lot of community. So the goal is maybe to focus less on content and focus a little more on community. And when we grow as plants together, have you ever noticed the trees growing out in the middle of the side of a mountain? They grow kind of thick and wiry from having been weathered. And they don't grow too tall because all of their energy is going into roots to stay strong. If they're really healthy, they have a balance where the roots go down and they're drawing on the community of the biome of the soil. And the plants growing together with one another. I'm building off of you. You're sharing your problems. I'm telling you about my problems. We're working together. I'm going to be part of your business. We're going to build these things together. We grow stronger and better when we're integrated with one another. Plants are the same way. When you plant more plants together, you get more fruit. Isn't that weird? Wouldn't you think that if you had a greenhouse and you had a box that was 8 by 10, if you planted 20 plants and you produced 100 pounds of tomatoes, if you plant twice as many plants, you may actually get 220 pounds of tomatoes. Because there's synergy. Isn't that strange? You know what? People are the same. That's the really interesting thing is people are the same. When you put people of different variety, the other is if you put tomato, they'll grow 200 pounds. If you put tomatoes with peppers and onions, then they'll grow more. Because the diversity in the soil, one needs potassium, one needs nitrogen, one drinks CO2, the other one puts off CO2. One's a nitrogen fixer, one's a nitrogen absorber. When you put them together, they grow together and they produce more fruit than anything together. I can take this stage and grow twice as many vegetables if I put them in a mix. Kind of cool, isn't it? I won't even draw the analogy, but you see where we're going with humans, right? Good foundations in regenerative agriculture is what we do for World Food Bank. So we're not a traditional food bank. In fact, we think all food banks should not exist for the most part. Is it more efficient for me to have you come as a person who has low income and not enough food to feed your family and have you drive out to the edge of town to find out what's available and then drive out again on Tuesday and then drive out again on Thursday? Or would it be better for you to get a message on your iPhone that says Kroger, King Soopers, Publix, Food Market we expect that we're going to have 50 extra pounds of tomatoes, 20 extra pounds of tomatoes, and it sends a message saying it's discounted 20, 50, 70, 90%. Go to the grocery store, do your regular shopping, and it tells you all the things you can go when you check out, just like your SuperCard. It discounts all these foods for you at the store. It does a couple things. Gives you more dignity. It lets you shop in one place. It makes you more efficient. And I didn't have 2 extra days of holding, gathering, shipping, all the other stuff, right? There are efficiencies that can come if we try to think of what's the most efficient for the person versus trying just to implement new technologies. But for agriculture, just so that I've given my pitch on regenerative agriculture, there's 6 core components. And really the first 5 were used for years, and then things changed. And we had a great conversation this morning with a group of tech leaders, and this became half of the conversation, which is the last point. But one is that soil, again, it's the temperature of the soil that matters, not the temperature of the air. So you want to keep the ground covered. So we try to keep something on the ground all the time, a diversity of crops. Sometimes it's grasses, sometimes it's legumes, sometimes it's whatever. And as those come and die, then you plant through them your new crops. And if you do that, the soil stays more stable. And you know what's interesting? Do you think someone whose enteric system is damaged, whether they've had a disease or they've been in a strange area or they haven't eaten for a long time, do you think they're more susceptible to a fungal infection, to a bacterial infection, to something, or someone with a healthy human enteric system? Someone healthy typically doesn't get as sick as often, right? The soil's the same way. When you build healthier soil, you don't get as many pests. A lot of people don't realize this. Pests, most of those that we think about, do you know what they're seeking out, what they sense chemically? They sense weakness, and they sense frailty. And their job is not evil. Their job is to remove the weakness from the garden so that the strong things will grow. Well, if your garden has strong soils and you're growing with healthier plants, the pests go away. So when you build a strong foundation with strong soils, covering the soil when you can, minimizing the soil disturbance, when you till soil and you turn it over, it's opening it to the sunlight, and it's not covered, it dries out, just like me. If I lay out in the sun, you could tell from my complexion, in about an hour and a half, I dry out. And it's not very pretty. This is not pretty now. Just think what it would look like with a couple hours laying in the sun, all dried out, with no hydration, not even a margarita. It would be bad. It wouldn't be pretty. It's the same with the soil. We turn it over and let it dry out, turn it over and let it dry out, it continues to die. So we want to make sure that we keep roots in the ground. The roots build the structure. When the plants pull carbon out of the air, the deeper the roots go, the more structure it builds, and that is like the townhome, the condominium for all the bacteria and fungus and everything to live. So the more carbon that you pull out of the air, the deeper you get roots, and the more carbon structure you get in the ground. But you know what else? You store more water. You want to stop having storms around the world? You want to get carbon out of the air? You plant a variety of plants with different variations in root depth, and they'll build carbon structures and they'll store more water. You know what 1% of soil organic matter will do? So a normal field in the US has about 1 to 2% soil organic matter. There are places around the world that are 10 or 12. But every 1% you go, if you take a farm in Iowa that has 2% soil organic matter, meaning kind of the living biome, and you go from 2% to 3%, it'll store 25 to 40,000 gallons more water per acre. Per acre. So when you have storms like we just had, that water gets absorbed into the ground and it's used later. You're banking all of that excess water. It also means you don't have all the runoff taking the topsoil and that untilled dead soil flowing away. So regenerative agriculture serves a purpose in being able to do all of those things together, dig bigger roots, create a bigger area for soil, for biome, and for nutrition to go into plants. I'm not picking on the hydroponics and aquaponics world because I used to be in that space. In a greenhouse about this size, we would grow 8 times more tomatoes in the greenhouse than we would grow in the soil outside in Berthoud, Colorado. The tomato capital of the world. Yeah, no, not necessarily. Anyway, I love Berthoud tomatoes. Yeah, nobody's ever said that. But anyway, but we would have 8 times more inside than we would have outside. But the ones that you eat outside tasted really good. They had a lot of depth and flavor. And regardless of your background, God or whomever you believe put that in the soil. We measure, we seek what we measure, right? Just like in businesses. We can talk about capital markets in a minute. But we work towards those things that we're measured by, right? Well, when we look at these primary things, I just want to grow a tomato that's red and pretty and send it off to the store because they want red and pretty. But if you want something that tastes really good and has tons of nutrition, it has 850 more nutrients in it when it's grown in the soil outside. Healthy soil goes a long way. The benefits of regenerative farming increase the amount that we produce. It allows us to put more animals on the same amount of land because more animals poop more, and more poop provides more ground cover, provides more biome building, provides stronger plants and others coming out of it, and it means we spend less money on chemicals and other things going into the soil. It also, as we said, means that we store more water. We pull water out of the air and we put it back where it's supposed to be, back into the ground. Solving for soil is the beginning of solving for poverty, for hunger, for water, for air, for climate in mass. If you want to do the most damage you can do, that's where it starts. What we found is that there really is a zero hunger formula. There's a mathematical solution to zero hunger. And we now have all the components we believe to be pretty accurate with it. But it still needs to be dynamic because the context of who you share that information with is dependent. The way they use it in Nebraska and their biology and their soil and that area may be different than it is 60 miles away. But now with AI and other things, we can start aggregating all this data and help people get to that point of efficiency where not only are we improving the quality of soil, we're storing more water, we're increasing the level of the biome, the food that we eat is healthier, our enteric systems are healthier, we're less susceptible to disease, but it has to be dynamic. We do that through something called the World Food Bank Foundation. The World Food Bank is a benevolently designed for-profit. Our goal, we sacrifice profits to make sure the ecosystem works. But we believe that it needs to be a sustainable model to be resilient. The World Food Bank Foundation is sending 800,000 meals right now to Florida and Carolina and Tennessee. It takes those excesses from farmers and we buy it so they have a place to sell it. We process it, store it, produce it into regionally specific meals, and then we send it for disaster response. So now we're helping keep farmers in business, and we're feeding people food without 800 grams of sodium per meal like you get with MREs, and we're filling the gap. The last thing I'm going to mention here is Farm Hero. If you don't follow it and you're an Instagram person, because I'm such a big proponent of staying on your phone, follow that on Instagram, if you will. Farm Hero Show is actually the Instagram thing. The TV show starts next month. It'll be on one of the Discovery networks, and then it's going to be on a whole group of stations in probably starting in January. There may end up being a channel after this, but Farm Hero goes and meets farmers all over the U.S. right now. It'll be international soon, that are using regenerative practices to talk to you about how they're building better soil, growing healthier animals, and improving the health of the planet. All at the same time, and we champion them because they're making life better for everyone else. I'll take a lot of questions in a little bit, but now, did I do that right? Bam, thank you. That's it. Thanks so much.
Hi, I have a question when you were talking about the more efficient way, is this working right? More efficient way, when you have a person who has food insecurity, instead of them going to a food bank, setting up something where, like the hypothetical app that lets them know that there's maybe past due food or food that's available, that's in access at a local supermarket. It's interesting because I was just at a Rotary meeting a few meetings back, and there was a person talking there from the local community market. And the community market is a great idea because people who come in there to shop without paying money, right? So they get their groceries. It is nice experience because it's like shopping in a real store, but there's this huge inefficiency where they have to have resources, where they drive around pretty big distances to get the stuff, right? So I love what you were saying, and my question is pretty basic. How do you get started with this? Because, most of the supermarkets are these national chains, like even our local city markets are Kroger, and they're merging with Safeway. Do you have experience or resources or a template where, this community with people who are interested, I'm interested, can get involved and start something more efficient and functioning here, considering our long I-70 corridor distances with all the cost of driving, et cetera?
That's a great question. A couple of things. One, my hands don't have all the dirt off of them from packing trucks in Spanish Fork, Utah the past few days. One of them came from Grand Junction for the food bank, for the food bank of the Rockies, right? They're going from wherever they can to bring the food back. The difference, of course, is that food is dried, so it has a multi-year shelf life. But I think the solution has to be dynamic. Each area, if you're an isolated town in the mountains, it's a little different. You need to prepare far ahead. When we talk about fresh fruits and veggies, you want to do that as best you can, but there's also the ability, and sometimes we go, well, we can only use what we need for Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. But we need to start saying, how can we fix that problem where we can have more than that? I'll give you an example. Some of the solutions that have been found in places like Kenya and Uganda and Tanzania would actually work here. So for example, we have folks that grow tomatoes, peppers, onions, bananas, and 40 to 60% of that is waste. Some of that's waste because it's number twos. They don't look pretty. If that was the thing, I would have been thrown out when I was 3. So I have a soft heart there. But what we found is that if you can train folks to slice those tomatoes or those onions or peppers and put them in a walk-in dryer that's powered by the waste food biomass that you were throwing away, now you don't have an energy expense and you're taking food and adding a 6 to 9 month shelf life. Now you put that on the shelf, it's dried, it loses about 3% of its nutritive value, but at least it's fruits and veggies. And then you can take folks that have grains, and we take that oatmeal or the cereals or whatever, we add the dried apples and pears and peaches and what have you. So it takes just being a little bit innovative and saying, how can we bring these things that we need for the nutrition that we want and solve the problems? that are there. So each area is a little different. In the mountains, for example, like a drying facility would probably be a huge benefit. And if you could find a way to use waste to keep it working, it would be a low cost, no cost. I've heard there's people here that know about solar as well. There's a rumor. And those kinds of things, when you're doing low and slow drying, solar actually works for that as well. But I don't know if that answers your question specifically, but those markets don't need to go away. They just need to be changed the way that they work. The companies that do it, the grocery stores, the front end of the retail, by the way, the app I was talking about, it already exists. It's being tested in 4 states right now. Yeah, so hopefully it'll be across the country. But you don't want to just shut down food banks. You just need to make food banks more efficient, right? Same thing. We don't want to get rid of systems. We just want to find out how do we integrate the stakeholders of the ecosystem to make them all more efficient. Yeah, I'm not sure if that answered all your question, but okay. If nothing else, I create more questions.
What's the name of the app if people want to go learn more about how it's being deployed?
I can't share it right now because it's being tested, but I will tell you that the fellow who developed it was one of the founders of Priceline. So if you can imagine the way Priceline works, we can estimate that we're going to have an extra number of seats. We're at that same technology, which is what you and I would call AI or ML that they used for Priceline for 20 years. That's being built in to estimate what the wastes will be for food production, farm level, as well as grocery store.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Is there a table that has a question for Dr. K? Yeah, right here, table 13.
So my question is like a lot less specific, but as a young person, what's one thing you wish you knew when you started your journey as like an ethical leader?
What is one thing I wish I knew when I started my journey? That's an excellent question. But I'm trying to think of when I woke up too, even. I could think about that. So it was, it is also not going to be a straightforward answer. So here we go. Growing up, I observed certain things that were happening to my mom and to the women in the community. And I saw women living. Okay, I'll give you an example of this woman who came to our house every night. I was little, but I never forget this woman who used to run into my mother's house every other night, and she'd come and go right at the back of the house, and my mom would do something like this, and shortly after, we would hear footsteps, and there would be a male voice saying something. I never remember it now what he said. And then my mom would say something, and I also never forget the receding footsteps of that man. So later on, I asked my mom, what was that thing with that lady who used to come to her house every night? She said the husband used to beat her up every night. And I asked my mom, she's an adult. How could anyone beat up a mother? And the one thing that took so long for me to understand was that I didn't have to be that woman. That was not my fate. So if I had known that early enough, I would have done certain things very differently, and I would have not lost as many years as I lost, going certain paths that probably took me to that woman's kind of situation. But then eventually I came around to finding my strength and my voice and my agency, and to recognize that that doesn't have to be my story. So the thing that I do now with especially young girls is we've been told so many stories from different sources, but make the distinction. It doesn't have to be your story. The choice is yours. Yeah.
Amen.
That really seems connected to the idea of taproot that you were sharing, that finding our taproot is what allows us to be expressed in the world. And so I wonder if both of you can speak to that concept a little bit. Like, what's the function of a taproot and how can people find theirs?
And actually, I'll answer before he goes, because his talk so connected with, I was like, wow. When I talked about taproot and he talked about how you build the soil and how this soil supports the plant and how the plant spreads in relationship to other plants, that taproot image I gave here, when I said the taproot is the one that collects the nutrients for the plant, it stabilizes the plant, it anchors the plant. It's the same way that life happens with a human being. And he so eloquently illustrated that nature is our best teacher. And when we look to nature, it so eloquently nurtures or teaches us about how to raise human beings, to raise children. So I felt that his presentation really held certain things that I didn't have time to explain and anchored them for me.
Thank you. Is Richard Poe still here?
I think he just stepped
He
out.
just stepped
yeah.
out. He brought his son with him. That's one thing, is to start young. One of the things that my wife and I did when our children were born is we took a couple of weeks and said, let's just watch them and kind of pray about it and just say, what is it that we believe they've been gifted with? And we said, let's come up with 2 words to describe them. And so my oldest daughter used to take construction paper and she'd make things out of it. And she was never afraid of anything. And our words for her were courageous builder. Now she's a competitive rock climber and a nurse, and she builds stuff all the time. I wish she'd quit, because I have to move to another house soon just to. And then my other daughter, her words were generous friend. And she's kind of the same way. Now she's an artist, but she's become well known for taking care of people who've lost families from suicide or domestic violence or what have you. So people from all over the country come in to have her. And I think that's important, to empower people when they're young, to give them some rails, to say, you're gifted in these areas, at least a couple things. And that, along with the caution of common sense isn't that common anymore. So question everything. Don't trust anyone over 40. That's yeah.
Thank you. Okay, we've got a question all the way in the back of the house. So I am going to wend my way through the tables. Once again, why don't you stand up and meet me part way? Here you go.
Hello. I believe that every leader or every person has a core belief that helps them kind of stem to the things they want to succeed and achieve. Like for me, it would be like being obsessed with the process. So I'm really curious about what is a core belief that you guys may have and how that's helped you succeed the things that you guys have in your life.
You want me to start? You can start if you. Well, I think there's a handful of core beliefs, and as you get older, they get amassed. You start acquiring more and more, I guess. But one of those is recognizing that you live in community. One is that we're all broken. Nobody's perfect. We're all broken. There are people that are really bright, and oftentimes. I think part of it is we think about folks that are extremely brilliant or gifted in one area. It means that they may also be equally ineffective in other areas. So there's a certain amount of energy that people have, that energy's been given to them to push forward. And the more we focus on our strengths and where we can move forward, the better. But it doesn't mean that anyone is all encompassing of skills and what have you. So everyone sits at the same table. Everyone is at the same level. And I think that's a part of it, is recognizing no matter where you go, there you are. And for me, that's part of it. The other is, I think that there is a core of of moral turpitude that needs to be addressed. And if I come from having been beaten and fed gunpowder as a young child, no, but being taught that there are singular truths, and understanding what those singular truths are, not accepting the latest new truth, but understanding that there are certain things, and always questioning what is told to me as truth, and especially if that comes from the government. Or if it comes from a neighbor that lives under the bridge, or what, it has to be, you want to make sure that it's qualified in the actions of the people that share it with you. I want to know that truth actually works. So it needs to be tested truth for me. A lot of that I pull, regardless of what your faith is. I think biblical truth is one of the core tenets, whether you follow the person of Jesus or you follow the tenets that were taught. Most of those principles have been found to be worthwhile in most anywhere. But I'll leave it there.
Great, thank you. There's a chart I shared during my talk, which I call the New Story framework, the one that had Utu in the middle. When I did that for myself, it was a process. And every time who I am kept changing. I'm a mother, I'm a this and the other. And so when I put together all those elements about who really did I want to be in the world, who is me, who is not defined by someone else or anything else, but really the life that is calling to be lived through me. I got to understand that I may say there's a life that Karambu is leading, but really the thing is there's a life calling to be lived through me. So who's going to live this life? And I came to this conclusion for myself. When you ask me who I am, I don't say I'm Karambu the professor, I'm Karambu this and the other, I'm Karambu all the things that I've done. I am not the things that I have done. I am who informs how I be in the world. And so when you ask me who I am, I say, my name is Karambu, I am love and light. And I say that with a lot of humility and sincerity because I tell my kids, every day I leave my door, love and light is what leaves that door. And whoever I meet, I pray that they encounter the love and light that I am so that they can remember their own. Yeah.
Amen.
Oh.
Amen. Well said.
All right, I think we have time for 2 more questions. So I want to see if the middle of the room has any questions. All right, right here. Say your name.
My name's Eva, and what is one piece of advice you would give to someone, or like one takeaway that you have gained from all your travels and experiences in your life?
For me, I would just say that people are amazing. If you just open your eyes and look, you'll be constantly amazed. Yeah. They can do anything. Just gather them together and give them a challenge. Yeah.
Trust the process, and you're enough.
Awesome. Thank you.
That's some really good advice right there. Thank you. All right, one more question from this side of the room here.
Thank you both very much. And my question is, what do you think makes us human, and how can that contribute to our own identities, but also how we connect to one another?
What makes us individually human, and how do we better connect with one another? Is that a good summary? Okay. Do you want to answer?
So let me just share from my experience how I got to that for myself. How do we get to be human together? I started telling myself, When I cut myself, the blood that comes out is red. When anybody else, no matter your color, no matter your status and everything, when you cut yourself, the blood is red. When you go eat food, I would imagine the process is the same, and it will get out when it needs to get out the same way. So in my search for what really makes us all human, I recognized that there is an essence, there's a way of being that is felt the same way for everybody. When I feel sad, I hope you feel sad the same way. That emotion is the same way. And so for me, it was to recognize that when I look into your eyes, the human that I want someone else to see me as is what I see in someone else. And that is what I cultivate. This thing that I don't have words for, but that I know brings me to this place of, when I look into your eyes, we are just one. Yeah.
There's an old Swahili saying, you see me, so I am here.
Yeah.
Right? Right. You're only valued to the degree that people recognize that you're there.
Are you talking of Ubuntu? I am because you are?
Ubuntu is the we version of that.
It's also
right?
the I. I am because you are.
I am because you are is the
I
Ubuntu.
am.
Right.
Yeah.
Which you're seeing everyone's pop up with Ubuntu now. Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a great phrase, the Ubuntu. I'm trying to think about it quickly. I think one is that that we're all part of a natural ecosystem, without trying to get back into a talk, that we need to pay attention to. And while we have, with capacity comes accountability. And humans have more capacity than any other animal on earth. It doesn't mean that we can be a benevolent ruler, or we can be a sadistic ruler. And how we treat other people and our planet and our business and our relationships is derived from that. Much of nature is naturally driven. I'll give you an example. Some of you probably already know this, but bees, for example, do you know how the pollen from a flower goes to a bee? One's positively charged and the animal is negatively charged. It's actually the other way around. And so the bee goes to eat and the pollen just sticks to the legs, right? And then it goes to the male or to the female plant, and the charge flips back the other way, and the pollen is now the other flower's pollinated. That's a natural function that they do. It's a side benefit of their natural structure. Humans have some of that, but we have so much capacity to do other things. And so I think for us the potential that we have comes from our ability to manage that capacity. So the skill sets that you've been given, you've been endowed with, are unique to anyone else in the world. But they're meant to be matched with other people in the world. We don't work well together, we work better in community. There's a synergy in community that you can't get alone. And so I would say seek out your people, and it doesn't mean the people that are just like you, it means the people that have a different charge, that are going to be the other side of the flower, that are going to produce the fruit that the planet needs to see. Does that answer your question?